Hey there, welcome back to another video. I am Ramona, still Ramona. Probably will continue to be Ramona for quite a while. This is another, what is the scariest experience you've had in your life? First story. When I was younger and living at home, there would be times where I was the only one in the house and suddenly there would be a loud ass crash. Like it sounded like someone literally picked up from our house from its foundation and then just dropped it. I would assume that I was just hallucinating, but I brought it up to my family and it turns out they've also experienced it, but only when they were alone in the house. I have yet to find a reasonable explanation. That's kind of creepy. I lived with my parents and was home alone one day. I had just gotten off work and was taking my standard post-work shit. It was maybe 12 in the afternoon, and neither of my parents got home from work till at least 3 or 4. Since I was alone, I was shitting with the door open, and I heard my laundry door open. My laundry room door connects to the garage, so I figured one of my parents got home early and came through the garage door. I closed the bathroom door slightly and yelled hello, but didn't get a response. I yelled hello again, but still no response. It was at this point that I realized I hadn't heard any footsteps come into the house yet. We have old wood floors that creak really loudly whenever you walk on them, so it's always obvious when anybody is walking anywhere in the house. I finish wiping my ass and get up to see who's home. As I'm standing up, I hear the laundry room door slam closed. I walk toward the laundry room and into the garage since I would catch whatever parent was home leaving the driveway. I open the laundry room door and the garage is shut and the light turned off. Our garage light stays on for 15 minutes after someone has opened the door before turning it off. I was kind of freaked out, so I locked the door and go into my room to watch YouTube videos. As I'm loading up a video, I hear the door that connects to my patio from my parents' bathroom open and close twice. I grabbed a fork, the only weapon near me at the time. I crept around the corner to see who was there. Nothing. Nobody. I waited outside their bedroom door for about 15 minutes in hopes of catching a burglar sneaking out from the closet, but no results came up. I freaked out, ran into my room, and watched my door just listening to anything else spooky going on. Nothing else happened, and I still don't have a reasonable explanation for it to this day. I was walking into my bedroom, just having closed the door. I felt a chill down my neck and was frozen in fear. At that moment, my necklace that I had been wearing fell to the floor. I don't know why, but I knew something strange and terrifying had just happened. I picked up my necklace from the floor, and it was still clasped. Edit. Since this has gotten some traction, I will give you more information. No, clearly I was not decapitated, as someone commented. That is why that is the scariest experience in my life. I've had some pretty creepy things happen. I've had sleep paralysis, which was terrible in my teens. This caused me to dabble in the mystic arts. I started messing around with Ouija boards. That's your first mistake. I have been told that I should use a planchette, the piece you move around, with a crystal embedded in it for protection. I have no idea if that matters. I got addicted to Ouija and would use anything for a planchette, eventually using quarters. It got to the point where I'd hover my hands over the quarter and it would move. I did this in my bedroom. My bedroom got haunted. At the same moment that my necklace fell off me, the poster of Interview with a Vampire fell off my wall. I love those books and that movie. Many terrible things happened in that room, including a fire and a mysterious hole in the wall that I discovered behind another poster that had been put up when I moved. There was a large hole about 6 inches in diameter. It wasn't there when I put up the poster. That one's pretty freaky. I'm gonna be honest with you. That one's a lot. Sitting in the living room, the front door open, but the screen door still closed. I looked at the sliding glass and saw my stepdad standing behind me in the reflection. A few seconds later, the back door opened and my stepdad walked in. The figure in the glass was gone when I looked back. Hesitate to say it's paranormal, but when I was home alone, about 12 maybe, my boombox randomly turned on the other side of the room to static really loudly. The scary part was that you had to push one of those big push buttons to do this. I, being avidly married to science at that point in my life, beat the shit out of it. Then suddenly my TV turned on to static. I'm fairly confident I must have stepped on the remote, turning it on and switching off the cable box channel, but I have no explanation for the boombox. And no, if I beat that shit out of the TV, I've had more to worry about than ghosts. I never really considered this paranormal, but it's something I've never been able to explain. I was pretty young, and something must have scared me because I was sleeping with the light on. The way my door hit my wall left a triangular shadow. Excuse me, and I swear the shadow was moving. I kept screaming for my mom, and she'd come in, clearly annoyed at this point, asking what was wrong, and I'd tell her the shadow is moving. It keeps moving. And she'd grumble, look over, and say nothing was wrong, and go to bed already. It was just really weird, and to this day, she has no idea that I was talking about or why I thought the shadow was moving. One other thing that definitely scared the crap out of me. My grandma died when I was young, so I didn't really know her that well. She also hated kids, so that didn't help. Well, I got her cross and her music box. The cross is one of those big iron ones with Jesus on it in great detail, about the size of an iPhone. The music box was a cabin house, and you opened it on the roof to play the music. Little crank at the bottom, pretty normal. Well, I kept the cross in the music box even though it didn't quite fit. I stopped that habit after the 5th time in the middle of the night that the music box would randomly start playing. The first time I assumed there was just a little tension left in the springs, and then it had been knocked and started playing. The second time I was spooked, and by the 5th I was like, fuck this, and took the cross and put it in the box in the garage, in the music box I put in my closet in another box. It hasn't gone off since. That one's a little freaky. Sometime around 2012, my two friends, Matt and Jake, they're brothers, shared an upstairs apartment with an old house. I stopped by one day while Matt was working and Jake was in the shower, or went to the shower right after I got there. I got impatient. Actually, I think my friend needed weed, so I left. 2 minutes later, Jake calls. Jake, very funny. Me? Huh? What? Jake, I know it was you. Me? What? He said everything that was on their cluttered living room table was placed on the stairs that they went to the front door. Full flight of stairs since it was on the second floor apartment to the house. One item in the middle of each step. I was freaked out, and I still don't know what happened, and he doesn't believe a word I say because he's pretty skeptical of anything and everything. I thought it was his brother Matt, because they would fuck with each other all the time, but he was working. Nobody else would have done something like that. There wasn't enough time for someone to arrive after me and complete the task before he called. The worst part is that I do stupid shit from those lines that he doesn't believe me. He still laughs and says, I know it was you. This is going to get buried. When I was in high school, I went about my day as usual. Ended up in my tech class, central air constantly on because of all the computers. But I got very uncharacteristically cold. I looked at the clock to see how long until class would be getting out. 10:15 a.m. Two of my friends gave me their jackets as blankets. A while later, I get a call from the front office, early dismissal. We got to the hospital around 11, and my parents told us my beloved grandfather had passed. Seriously, we had a bond beyond any of his other grandchildren as my father's firstborn. He was always sent me home from absolutely anything we attended with a golden, delicious apple. I can't bear to eat them now. I asked the nurse what time he passed. I was terrified I missed him by minutes. 10:15 a.m. This story continues, and my favorite photo of him is cut off the top of his head. I asked a highly talented friend of mine to please draw a portrait for his funeral, finishing his form in my favorite photo. My grandmother called my father the day before the funeral. My friend had given me the portrait earlier that day, and it was ready. My aunt had called her that morning and said that she had a dream about Grandpa. Thank so-and-so for the picture. I hadn't told him about it yet. I pulled it out of my folder for my father, and he started bawling. Aww. I still have one experience burned into my memory, and this is when I was around 7 or 8. I woke up in the middle of the night to find my mother standing over my bed, though she was a bit blurry and kind of going pink. Once I realized that she was there, I asked if she could get me a glass of water. Then I remember turning to look at my glowing balloon Winnie the Pooh nightlight to look for the cup that was usually next to my bed. I turned back to hand it to her, and she was still standing there, motionless. So I asked again, Mom, can I have a cup of water? But she continued to stand there. Mom, 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 I started to shout. Then, when in burst my mom from my bedroom, wearing a long, one-size-fits-all Garfield sleep teeth. What? What's wrong? Just as she burst through the door, the pink glowing version of my mom faded from her head down to under my bed. Well, it just so happened that I had lost my tooth that very same day. So in my little mind, I had just witnessed the tooth fairy. And to cement my claim, my dollar bill the tooth fairy had left me was found under my bed. I told everyone I knew that I had seen the elusive legend. It wasn't until years later that I was retelling my story that I realized that the tooth fairy only happened to look like my mother because it was actually my grandmother whom had passed long before I was born. She also looks a lot like my mom. So once I put it together, there was no doubt that the figure looked exactly like images I've seen of her later in my life. To top all this off, when my daughter was around 4, she told me that sometimes she'd wake up to see Nana, my mom, watching her sleep. Yep, still doing that. That would freak me out. But yeah, of all things. When I was about 8 and staying with a friend, I woke up from a dream that my dog died. Crying, I asked to go home. This had never happened before and never happened again. The parents got me to go back to bed. I did, and in the morning when I got home, my family was sitting silently in the living room. I found out that my dog was run over late that night at the same time, or around that time, that I'd had the nightmare. I was so shocked that I couldn't even cry. I used to crawl into my parents' bed every night when I was like 8. The only reason I stopped was because one night when I was trying to wake up my mom to scoot over so I could get in, I felt something wrap around my ankle. I jumped back and immediately ran back into my own bed. I never tried sleeping on their bed again. We never had indoor pets, so the only other logical thing I could think of was that it was one of my sisters hiding under there. If that was them, they've never confessed, almost 20 years later. A few years ago, the day before my birthday, I had a really weird dream. I was in my mom's kitchen with my mother, duh. Only there were no walls, and there was just a dark expanse all around. I walked up to her and said, "So how did he die?" She replied, "He woke up dead." I woke up at that point, around 4 a.m., according to my phone, and wrote this down in my dream journal beside my bed, which I was keeping at the time in an attempt to spur lucid dreaming. It was not successful. My first lucid dream occurred entirely by accident 2 months ago. A few hours later, maybe after 8, after the sun was up, certainly, my brother called me, crying to say that our Uncle S was dead. Apparently, my Aunt S woke up around 6 a.m. to wake him up for work as usual, only to find him blue-faced and cold in the bed next to her, choked on his vomit. This was a completely unexpected death. He had no medical conditions that would have worried my aunt, his sisters, or his mother, never mind the rest of the family. Even the autopsy came back inconclusive. They couldn't find any reason, medical, neurological, or chemical, as to why he suddenly puked in his sleep and didn't wake up from it. Although my aunt did say that the coroners estimated he'd been dead for 1 to 2 hours by the time she got up, right around the time I woke up from the wake up dead dream. Wow, that's a little freaky. I used to work at a pool in my hometown and would work the early shift for a couple times a week. On 2 separate occasions, I have seen the top of a little girl's head run past. The first time, just outside the cash area where there's a short wall. The second time, which was another lifeguard was on duty, was right in front of the cash counter. It's just on the top of the head with long black hair and pigtails that would go by past. This was also happened to other lifeguards on other shifts, and no one has an explanation for it. There has been a few other weird things happen there as well, but no one has ever been able to find out anything about it. When I was pregnant with my second son, I had a very vivid dream about my first son, that he died in his room. In my dream, I walked into his room and picked him up. I could feel how cold and heavy he was in my arms. I was screaming and screaming, trying to get help, but every time I ran through his bedroom door, I'd end up back in his room. I knew I was dreaming, but I couldn't wake up. I suddenly heard someone say very clearly, Mordithith? Mordish? I don't know what this person's name is. This is a bizarre name. Mordish? He's fine. Wake up. And I opened my eyes to see an elderly man standing at my bedroom doorway. He nodded and walked in. I immediately jumped out of bed, still sobbing, and ran through my house, turning all the lights, looking for this man. At first I thought it was my uncle who lived upstairs, but my door was still locked. I realized that I did recognize the man, and he was always in the dreams as a child, and never spoke, just stood there, always in the background, and I never thought anything about it until that moment. I checked on my son and brought him back to sleep in my bed. A few days later, I was helping my mom go through some old photos that she had given us from her family. She was raised by her aunt, and her family had been super secretive and possessive of photos and such. We were looking at a picture of a large family sitting around a long table. I recognized my mother's bio mom, my great aunt, great Nana, and then there he was, the man in my dreams and who woke me up, sitting there next to my great Nana. Same look, same flannel shirt, pins in his pockets, and balding head. I pointed him out to my mom. It was her grandfather who passed away when she was a young girl. She was his favorite and wasn't afraid to show it. I explained what had been happening all my life, and he was always in the black background of my dreams and never said a word until I'd had my night terror. There was no way I ever saw that photo of him, and I've never met him in my life. I have so many paranormal stories. I should really write them all down. Tomorrow I'm going to smudge my aunt's house because her son heard laughing at night, and his room was freezing cold all the time. I knew from the very moment I stepped foot in the house that something was amiss with that end of the house. I was staying the night at a friend's house when I was about 13. We were watching The Shining with her older sister and another friend when I saw a black figure in my peripheral vision. I turned my head all the way to the right and watched this solid black figure in the shape of a man wearing a cowboy hat walk from one side of the house to the other. I didn't say anything to my friend when it happened. I thought maybe my mind was just playing tricks on me because the movie was scary. After the movie, my friend's sister and others all left the house to stay elsewhere. My friend's parents were out of town. In the middle of the night, I woke up to someone stomping up the stairs and toward the room we were sleeping in. We thought maybe her sister had just come home and ran upstairs to bed. We went to check and found no one. We heard the stomping a few more times and then a really loud bang on the wall between our bedroom and the outside of the house on the second story. My friend looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Did you see the man earlier?" I swear no one else was home, and my friend was just as terrified as I was. We hid under the blankets and didn't come out until we could see sunlight. This isn't my only encounter with unexplained paranormal things happening. My dad's house when I was a kid was scary, to say the least. Haunted, if you believe in that kind of thing. We used to see a man in a military uniform in the long hallway leading towards my brother's room. The security alarms would go off for no reason, like someone was opening and closing a door over and over again. The one time we had a decorative plate fly off the shelf and hit a mirror clear across the room. Yeah, that's definitely some haunted crap. Things around me always seem to fall very hard on the floor or fly from one side of the room to the other. The most memorable was when I was working late hours at my old department one day with a coworker and we heard something hit the wall very loudly. Then we walked over to see that we found one of the magnets on the mini fridge was on the other side of the room. Another pretty memorable one was when I saw a pretty heavy metal cat statue fly off the bookshelf that it was on and hit the wall 10 feet in front of it. Yeah, that's a little strange. A friend had an old farmhouse from the 1800s. There was a third floor that the family swore was haunted. It was a fun game that we used to fuck with the ghost. Never really took it seriously, just 13-year-olds playing paranormal. We were up on the third floor playing Nintendo 64 when a tower of PlayStation games toppled several feet, like the bottom and top half landed several feet, and the N64 switch physically switched off, and the TV turned off and on. We just left. The house caught fire when we were on vacation 2 weeks later. Absolutely no explanation for it. I don't believe in the paranormal. That shit was just weird, and I would love to know what happened. In the sandbox, I saw some guys loading suspicious packages in the back of a small truck. None of the guys were the ones that I was looking for. My spotter suddenly says, "Let's go." Now this guy was pretty steady no matter what, so I snatch up my rifle and my pack and start running behind them. Suddenly, there was a huge explosion where the truck was. I asked what he saw that scared him, and he looked at me weird and said, "You said run," so I ran. I never said anything, but our nest was covered in shrapnel when we looked back. That is pretty cool. We're going to stop it with that one because I don't want to top that story. That one's pretty cool. Hope you guys have enjoyed this. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, do all the things, do some of the things. Hope you enjoyed this video. Go listen to another one, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.